and she's going to update us on the hazardous waste permit for Sandy National Labs.
Thank you, Dave. Just wanted to give you guys a brief update. Last time we were here, since the bottom of this list, for hazardous operating permit, new cases, an application in some cases, a comprehensive permit request, first submitted February 2002. We updated it several times. In September 2012, the New Mexico Environment Department issued a draft permit for public comment. It covered operations at 10 hazardous waste management units and also proposed granting corrective action complete status for 24 solid waste management units and areas of concern. There was an opportunity for public review and comment, and that comment period ended February 14th, 2013. And then it was reopened in March 2014 when the New Mexico Environment Department scheduled a public hearing. And the comment period then extended through the end of the hearing. The hearing was held May 4th through the 8th, 2014. And at this point, the New Mexico Environment Department in the future will be issuing a final permit and a final determination regarding the 24 solid waste management units and areas of concern. That has not happened yet. We do not know when it will happen. This is a summary of the scope of this permit that the New Mexico Environment Department will be issuing at some point. It covers operations at 10 hazardous and mixed waste management units, our hazardous waste handling unit, thermal treatment unit, radioactive and mixed waste management unit, auxiliary hot cell unit, 5 Monsanto storage bunkers, and our corrective action management unit, which is undergoing post-closure care. The middle would be the corrective action that would be required for solid waste management units and areas of concern under this permit. There are currently no corrective action activities that would be conducted under this permit because they're all conducted right now under the compliance order on consent. And then the third activity is tracking of solid waste management units and areas of concerns for which corrective action is complete. And those are either with or without controls. So there are these 3 main activities that would be covered under the permit. And of the 10 units, hazardous and mixed waste management units, these are the activities that occur. Storage in containers, treatment by open burning, storage, treatment by various methods in containers, repackaging. Again, storage and treatment is what we do at Sandia. We do not do disposal on site. We did in the past, but we no longer do that. And then we have post-closure care of the corrective action management unit. If you need more information about our permit and the New Mexico Environment, you can check the New Mexico Environment Department website at this URL. You can check UNM Zimmerman Library Lobo Vault online collection, and you can call our community involvement hotline at this number. And if you're interested, we also brought along a map of the base that shows where these units are. Our hazardous waste handling unit is just south of Technical Area 1, and the rest of the units are in this area. So we have the thermal treatment unit, the auxiliary hot cell unit. Down here we have the CAMU, corrective action management unit, the radioactive and mixed waste management unit. And then over in this area of the base, we have the 5 Monsanto storage bunkers. And the solid waste management units and areas of concern are actually scattered throughout the base. They are shown on this second map that's over here against the wall if anyone's interested. And that would be it. I can probably take 1 or 2 questions before we move on to the next. Nope.
All right, Dave, you're next. And an update on mixed waste?
Right. Update on the Environmental Restoration Program. I'm David Miller. I manage the Sandia Environmental Restoration Program. and I will give you a status on the program for the last 6 months. Okay, our mission is to identify, characterize, and remediate hazardous and radioactive material disposal areas. We started our program approximately 20 years ago. We started with approximately 315 ER sites, and all activities that are performed are regulated by the New Mexico Environment Department under a corrective action order on consent and other federal and state regulatory requirements. DOE, NNSA, and Sandia are in complete compliance with all corrective action order on consent requirements, as well as all federal and state requirements. So we've been a very successful program over the last 20 years. We've closed out completely 279 of the 315 sites. 36 of the sites are currently in the corrective action process, and I'll present more information on each of those 36 sites, particularly focusing on the work of the last 6 months. So out of the 36 sites, we have 24 corrective action complete sites that Anita just referred to. Those went through the RCRA Part B permit hearing. We have 5 soil sites that we've assessed all the soils around those locations. The state asked us to do additional groundwater investigation, which we've been working on. We have 3 active mission sites where there's actually Sandia operations ongoing at those locations. We have our mixed waste landfill, and then 3 areas of groundwater concern that we're performing evaluations and investigations on. So I won't talk any more about the active mission sites, and we'll go on to talk a little bit about the next slide, the 24 sites that are in the corrective action complete process. Next. Those sites, we've completed the investigation on them. We submitted them for corrective action complete determination to the state. In 2012, we supported the NMED in their RCRA Part B permit hearing in May, provided testimony in support of the closure of those sites, and we're currently awaiting the Secretary's decision on those sites, and we anticipate that decision sometime in the fall of this year. On to the 5 soil sites that are undergoing groundwater investigation. These are our sites that in 2010, we had completed a lot of site soil characterization work at these 5 locations, but the state asked, and we really didn't find much at those locations, but the state asked if we would put in some groundwater monitoring wells a couple of years ago, which we did. We characterized the groundwater for the last 2 years, and the results of those characterization studies have been finalized. And within the next couple of weeks, we'll be submitting the groundwater characterization reports at those 5 sites to the Environment Department for their review and evaluation. Our mixed waste landfill that I know you all know about, it's gone through a RCRA hearing process where the Environment Secretary made a decision. You can put it onto the picture. Where the Environment Secretary made the decision based on our proposal that based on our characterization and evaluation of the landfill, that the installation of a vegetative soil cover was the correct remedy for the site, with the installation of groundwater monitoring wells and soil vapor wells around the perimeter to perform long-term monitoring at this location. And this is a picture of the landfill itself after the installation of the landfill cover with groundwater monitoring wells around the site itself that we've been monitoring for many, many years now. We can move on. We also were requested by the state to prepare a long-term maintenance and monitoring plan. And that is a very detailed plan that identifies what we should sample at this landfill to ensure that no materials are released to the environment in its state of closure. We prepared that plan. It was approved by the state. And this year in June, we submitted the first set of results from the data that we collected for the long-term monitoring program. The NMED approved that report in August, And we also this year installed 3 soil vapor monitoring wells in July, and we prepared a report that documented the installation of those 3 soil vapor wells in September. At the end of September, the state approved that report. Next. This is the installation of one of the 3 soil vapor wells. There were multi-ports for sampling soil vapor in each of the wells, and the ports are at depths of 50, 100, 200, 300, and 400 feet. And the purpose of these sampling ports is to have an early detection system. If there were soil vapors that were migrating downward below the landfill, we would see that in the soil vapor prior to it reaching the groundwater at a depth of 500 feet. So we would have some early assurances that there'd be no migration of contaminants from the landfill over the long term. Next. So where we stand right now, as of September 25th, DOE and Sandia requested the state to grant the landfill corrective action complete with controls status to the site, and those controls are defined in the long-term maintenance and monitoring plan. On October 8th, the state granted the corrective action complete status based on their preliminary determination of the information that we've provided. On October 20th, DOE and Sandia then, with the approval from the state, requested a Class 3 permit mod, and that would initiate the public process of granting corrective action complete status to the mixed waste landfill with long-term monitoring controls in place. And also on October 20th, there was a legal notice that was published in the Albuquerque Journal that initiated a public comment period. And that also announced that we are having a public meeting November the 18th at the Manzano Multi-Generational Center, located just south of Costco, due east of Eubank, from 4 to 8 o'clock p.m. And there's a flyer on the table by the entrance that has the public notice and notice of the public meeting. And we welcome people and the members of the public to attend. What that will do is provide information of all the work that's been conducted at the mixed waste landfill, and then provide an opportunity for the public to then direct comments to the state about any of the information that's presented. There will also then be a decision by the Environment Secretary to, at some point in time in the future, to hold a public hearing on the closure of the landfill itself. Okay? So then we move on to 3 areas of groundwater contamination that we're currently investigating. The burn site, Terrace Arroyo, in Technical Area 5. Go on. The burn site over here, located at the base of Manzano Mountains. Terrace Arroyo, to locate us, this is the Albuquerque runway, and we're located right about here right now, as well as Tech Area 5, which is on the northeast corner of a larger Technical Area 3, where Sandia conducts a lot of their field test activities. So I'll talk about each of these 3 areas: the burn site, Terrace Arroyo, and Tech Area 5. This is an aerial view of the burn site. It was an above-ground burn testing facility located, as I said, at the base of Manzano Mountain. Go next. The groundwater there, we have 8 wells that are monitored for groundwater quality and 2 additional wells for groundwater elevations. Those 2 wells, they used to be used for groundwater quality monitoring. The water level has declined. We've kept them in place so that we can monitor if the groundwater recharges. The groundwater does, and most wells contain nitrates above the drinking water standard, and one of those wells contains perchlorate. The nitrates are at a level of up to 42 parts per million, with a regulatory standard at 10. Perchlorate is at 9 parts per billion, and there's no drinking water standard for perchlorate itself. But that is just in one well in the center of the burn site itself. Where we stand right now is in June of this year, the state approved an extension request that we had made to extend a delivery date on a corrective measures evaluation report. What this request was based on is that the more we looked at the data that we had, we felt that there was insufficient data to accurately determine the best way to remediate the limited nitrate contamination that was at the site. So we're currently conducting what's referred to as a weight of evidence process with the state and DOE to determine where we would best install additional groundwater wells and assess other geologic conditions around the area to better determine the hydrogeology in the location, and then determine through a corrective measures evaluation process the best way to proceed at the site. And I will add that this area is a little over 8 miles from a drinking water source, and we do know the extent of it down gradient. So we know that nitrates will not migrate to any local drinking water source in the area. Next. This is Tierras Arroyo. Right across here's Tierras Arroyo. This is the southern end of Technical Area 1, which is the main tech area for Sandia. And it's very closely located with Kirtland Air Force Base buildings. Next. At Tierras Arroyo, we have a perched groundwater system that's located about 250 feet below ground surface. The regional aquifer is 500 feet below ground surface. So this perched system is another 250 feet above the regional drinking water area. We have 21 wells that are currently and actively monitored on a quarterly basis. 9 additional wells are measured for groundwater elevations. The perched water is contaminated with nitrates and TCE. The nitrates up to 39 parts per billion, and the parts per million, and the TCE is up to 9 parts per million. We're currently updating a 2005 corrective measures report that was submitted to the NMED. 9 years have gone by. We haven't heard back from the state around our existing or our 2005 evaluation. So we felt that it was time to take additional data that we had and resubmit that based on new data both from Sandia and from investigations that have been done by Kirtland Air Force Base. And in this meantime, we continue to monitor the groundwater in this perch system. This is Tech Area 5. Again, this is located just on the very northeast end of Tech Area 3. It's approximately 5 miles away from any drinking water wells. The groundwater here is at approximately 500 feet. And we have a groundwater mound that essentially encapsulates the fence line around the Tech Area 5 boundary to give you an idea of the extent of the groundwater contamination in this area. As I mentioned, groundwater is at 500 feet. We have 16 wells that are monitored for groundwater quality and elevation. Again, nitrates and TCE are main contributors to that contamination, with nitrates up to 14 part per million and TCE up to 19 parts per billion. On December of last year, we requested to the state to replace a 2005 corrective measures report that we had submitted to the state. And basically what we wanted to do is take the last 9 years of data, reevaluate the alternatives that we have available to us, and determine what would be the best method to approach the cleanup of the groundwater in Tech Area 5. And we're currently working on the evaluation process right now and coming up with cost and schedule estimates of what it would take to perform this work. And in the meantime, continue to evaluate the groundwater data and monitor the wells that are there. So in summary, we had our public hearing on the 24 sites in May. We're waiting for the state to make their final decision based on that hearing process. The mixed waste landfill, the long-term maintenance and monitoring program is being implemented with our first annual report being prepared this past year. 3 soil vapor wells installed. We requested to the state the corrective action complete status, and we will be looking forward to our public meeting November the 18th. Next. Groundwater, 5 soil sites where we've evaluated the groundwater at those sites, finishing up those reports. They'll be sent to the state here in the next couple of weeks. and the other groundwater areas of concern, continue groundwater monitoring, nitrates, TCE being the contaminants of concern, and we're updating our CME for those sites, and we continue to move along with those evaluations, and we'll be working with the state to determine the best method and process for closure of the sites. So with that, I will close. We have, again, as Anita had provided, we have all our information at the Zimmerman Library, the New Mexico Environment Department website, and community involvement number there. If anybody has any additional questions or information that you would like to dig into, that's where you find it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Janet?
Is this working?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Can you hear me? Oh, that's better. Okay. So when you did sunk the wells and the deeper wells into the Vados zone, the Vados zone at the mixed waste landfill, what was the result?
Well, we've collected one set of soil vapor data now. They'll be monitored on a regular basis, but we have one set of data, and it was very, very low in the upper sampling ports, very, very low volatile organics that were identified. But those would be expected to be seen in the site. And calculations that we're working right now determine there would not be at a high enough level to have reached the groundwater table. But it really takes a suite and a number of years of data to really determine if there's what the stability of the VOCs are in the Vados zone, as well as any potential migration of those VOCs.
So at what depth did you detect these VOCs, and what are the VOCs involved?
I wouldn't be able to tell you. I don't have on the top of my head what the VOCs are. They would probably TCs, but and the concentrations are in the very, very low part per billion range.
And how can the public access that report?
That data will be part of the, I think, Mike, can you help me if that data will be available at the public meeting that will be
presented in the June 2015 annual report.
Okay.
So that information will not be available for these upcoming meetings on the mixed waste landfill?
That becomes part of the data that's reported in the annual report, and the state reviews that annually as we submit it, as they did this past year.
Okay. Well, I would like to make a request that that data be available to the public before the November meeting. It seems like the public will not have the information that they need without this newest data, which does show contamination, spreading of contamination, right? So I'm going to request that at least the raw data or whatever you can provide would be provided to the public before that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. And then I wanted to speak a little bit to Terrace Arroyo. When you spoke of a perched aquifer, that aquifer is continuous with our drinking water aquifer. Isn't that true? Isn't it connected?
Well, we're collecting data now from an investigation that Kirtland had done. We're waiting for those data results to then be able to get a better idea of the conceptual site model of the perch system.
Don't we already know that the perch system is connected to the larger aquifer? I mean, I've seen pictures, and isn't there a little neck of water that connects the larger aquifer to the perched aquifer?
I think the purpose of the Kirtland evaluation that they did for a nitrate investigation plan was to better define that area and extent of the nitrates in both the regional and the perch system.
So the current maps are inaccurate, the ones that show a connection?
We don't have the data, Janet, so we need that data to be able to evaluate.
I'm just asking, are the current maps that are available, the ones that were provided, the hazardous waste hearings and previous to that, are those inaccurate? Those show a connection. Are you saying that those are inaccurate?
Well, I'm not saying that they are inaccurate. I'm saying that there will be more data that will be able to better define that system in Tierras Arroyo.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
You need to bring up the microphone?
Well, here. You bet.
Okay, I had two questions. In approximately 2004, Dick Fate, one of your Sandia managers, is on record of saying that every 5 years there would be a review of the mixed waste land site. That was in 2004. You might comment on that. And then secondarily, I'm interested in knowing and understanding, I guess, this process pathway you're going down for the mixed waste landfill. Is that, you'd mentioned closure, and given the material that's in there, it would seem that there would have to be incredible restrictions because a lot of that material will not decay for thousands and thousands of years. And then finally, if one were to do excavation, on paper, what do you see as the major challenges associated with excavation of the mixed waste land site?
Okay.
The three questions.
Right, three questions.
I said only two.
First, the state has made a decision around
Watch out.
the 5-year review.
Don't you get too close to him. No, we'll get the
We'll
Henry.
off screen. The state has made a decision that the 5-year review on the mixed waste landfill long-term maintenance and monitoring plan is based on the approval of the plan when it was put into place.
I mean,
So this set of data that was approved and reviewed by the state was the first of 5 years. So in 4 years from now, the state will then ask Sandia to do a reevaluation of the closure status of the landfill. And the state's made that decision in terms of their review period. They wanted to have a system in place in order to collect data around the landfill from monitoring that's there in order for them to evaluate the success of the closure process. So question one. Question two, I'm sorry, in terms of the greatest challenges in terms of excavating the landfill, I think there are numerous. And those have all been debated for a lot of years. The state secretary has made a decision around this being the closure process. I don't want to make you, about the closure process. There are numerous challenges that would occur. For me personally, as a manager at Sandia, I would be very concerned about hazards to workers, excavating materials that may or may not have an off-site disposal pathway. They would have to be stored. Some of those materials would have to be stored on-site. And with its on-site storage, that would pose possibly even greater risk to workers than it would have in its current state for the current period of time. Of course, that's going to be reevaluated every 5 years. Now, I'm sorry, your second question? Okay, as I said, right, on the closure issue, we've submitted the first annual report. We have to submit 5 of the annual reports, and then there'll be a reevaluation of the success of the closure process. It gets linked to the approval of the long-term maintenance and monitoring plan.
When you talk about closure,
Oh, right.
how do you envision that material that you just said was too hazardous to be removed and didn't have a storage home and couldn't be stored on site
Okay,
would have closure? Help me understand.
I will. Right, it's a regulatory term. Closure with controls, and it's the with controls that must be emphasized. I mean, we have, as Anita showed in her presentation, we have sites corrective action complete without controls, corrective action complete with controls. Several of the sites already have controls in place that limit the activities that could occur. Now, at the mixed waste landfill, there will be a lot of controls in place. Part of those are linked with the long-term maintenance and monitoring plan that say you will collect these type of data of the maintenance of the cover, of the effectiveness of the cover, of the performance of the soil vapor monitoring wells, of the performance of the groundwater monitoring wells, of biota data that's collected at the site. And that's all linked to the LTMMP. And those controls are a requirement for us to continue to do and collect that data. Then every 5 years, we reevaluate that data and make a decision that the state would or would not approve as to whether the continued cover is effectively performing our performance measures. And if not, then reevaluate the process of, are there other options that we could pursue at that time?
When just let me finish that third one. When Sandia looks at this and balances the risks, which are real, like you said, in excavation, against restrictions and monitoring for eternity, literally thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years of mixed waste landfill, don't you see a real cost issue there or concern? I mean, what do you envision would be the restrictions? No one could ever get near that site. You couldn't use it for industrial. It had to be totally institutionally controlled.
And it will be.
And so it's a 3-acre almost site in the middle of Sandia, which may down the road, long ways down the road, because you have beautiful buildings, but or something else. But it'll never be industrial. It'll never be anything but totally institutionally controlled. Given the materials that you have in it.
And I agree with you.
And Sandia knows that. And sites equally challenging, such as the RAD and the Ken Waste landfills, have been activated. And so you're right. Some of the materials cannot be stored off-site. You would end up storing those. But wouldn't that come under eventually your special nuclear materials processing plants and so on?
Well, that would be.
You have a lot of that material on site.
Oh, no. Special nuclear materials have all been removed from Sandia.
So you have no special.
No, we do not. No accountable materials are at Sandia. They were last moved off-site, I believe, Dave, you probably know, last year? I think it's the last materials moved. No, we do not. What?
Because they were all industrial.
Mhm.
Well, the material in the mixed waste landfill is not all industrial.
Some of the materials go back into the material control and accountability process within DOE and have gone to Idaho, have gone to Los Alamos, have gone to the storage facility at Nevada. So a lot of the things were dispersed across the country into other DOE facilities. We're down to one governed nuclear facility under the 1027 standards.
So what I hear you saying is that you don't have any wastes above ground in Sandia that are stored.
No, we have waste.
Why are they stored?
Why are they stored? Well, some of them are stored because WIP is closed.
Well, but that are
No, I mean, there, as Anita pointed out, we have wastes that are stored at different storage facilities and the radiological waste storage facility, but those are processed and or dispositioned within about a 1-year time frame.
So what is it in the mixed waste landfill that we're not going to? What in the mixed waste landfill would not have a home, in your opinion? Because there is non-DOE waste in there.
Sorry, Eric, I do not know enough about the inventory of the landfill to talk about, what is and what is not have a disposal path. I can talk about some of the materials that are there would not have a disposal path and would need to be stored long-term above ground at some type of interim storage facility. We feel that it is better to keep those materials in place while they naturally degrade over time. You particularly have seen the inventory charts and how it degrades over time, so maybe 80 years from now or whatever, there would be a decision, and there may be technologies in place at that time, and there may be disposal facilities at that time in a point in the future where the decision would be correct to do some other corrective action at the site. But in the meantime, we feel that the best method to effectively manage safely those wastes is the process that the state has agreed to and the one that we're pursuing. Diane?
This might be the Jack one thought. Think of Superman and Kryptonite. If that is the waiver of Superman, it doesn't hurt him. That's the misplaced landfill. Low ground, not hurting anybody.
You know,
It's not a substance that's food. So to my mind, Kryptonite and Superman is the best analogy. It's down there, but it's not hurting us. It is down there.
and I would also add, I was very involved in the decision process for the excavation of the chemical waste landfill. And at the time, our decision was to build an on-site treatment and storage facility. But the state was rather reluctant about that, and they really did want to have all those materials moved off-site, moved to an off-site disposal facility, wherever that might be. And with the state, with the public involvement and public process, there was a lot of concern raised about the number of trucks moving those contaminated soils through the city, out of Sandia, and so the state came across to making the decision that the most appropriate thing to do was to build an on-site disposal facility, which we did and which is actively being managed, much like the mixed waste landfill is being actively managed for the long term. Thank you. I probably need to wrap it up.
Right.
Thank you.
We'll get to other questions as time allows, but first I want to introduce Carolyn Bird. We've talked a lot about corrective action complete with controls and everything. The LTS process is what governs the corrective action complete with controls. So here's the person that's in control of the controls, Carolyn.
Thank you. I'm Carolyn Bird, and I'm the program coordinator for the Long-Term Stewardship Program. And I'm here to tell you tonight what has been happening in the Long-Term Stewardship Program for 2014. Now, our mission is to protect you, all of you, and our environment from any hazards that are associated with the residuals that would be left at the former ER sites that were just described by David. Okay. And our program does conduct extensive monitoring, and that is required by the New Mexico Environment Department and also the Department of Energy. And the reason we have this program is because our legacy sites were cleaned up to risk levels, but although most sites were cleaned up to residential risk levels, we do have some low levels of residuals that are present out there. And the monitoring, such as the 2 monitoring wells you see in this picture, this monitoring assures that we are indeed protecting the environment. In 2014, the main activity we conducted was the monitoring of groundwater wells. And we completed all of our mandated monitoring on schedule. And that's approximately 76 monitoring wells. Some of those were described by David Miller. And we sample those at various intervals for multiple constituents. And you can see the picture of one of our technicians. He's there with our groundwater monitoring truck and monitoring one of the wells. And we have also sampled 11 soil vapor wells. And all this data is always out to the public. And we completed our annual groundwater monitoring report with the 2013 data. And that was completed in June of 2014. And it's available on our website and as well as on the websites that were mentioned, and you can take a sheet when you go. Okay. Now this is just a map to refresh your memory on where these monitoring wells are, and the blue dots are centered in the technical areas at Sandia. To get you oriented, there's the city of Albuquerque up in the upper left, and there's the Albuquerque Sunport there on the left also. And you can see we have wells that are scattered throughout the technical areas as well as into the U.S. Forest Service land over toward the right of the map. And another main activity of the long-term stewardship program is to conduct monitoring at the chemical waste landfill. Now this beautiful morning at the chemical waste landfill shows the evapotranspirative cover there in green, and that's an engineered cover that's at grade that was installed across the landfill. Next. And here's a diagram that shows you the green represents the chemical waste landfill, and there's the monitoring wells. We've got 3 down gradient wells and 1 up gradient that are included in the network at the chemical waste landfill. Next. Now we have, as a driver at the chemical waste landfill, the regulatory driver, the post-closure care plan. And the long-term stewardship program does implement all of the monitoring that's required by the New Mexico Environment Department here. And for groundwater monitoring, we do monitor semi-annually for TCE, chromium, and nickel. And we monitor annually for 5 other VOCs. And the results of this monitoring, the most recent year, is that no concentration limits or trigger levels were exceeded in our groundwater. And then we also conduct soil gas monitoring annually at 5 multi-port monitoring wells, and each of those contain more than 1 sample port, so there's 21 depth-specific sample ports, and we do monitor for quite a number of constituents, 50 VOCs out there. And again, the results from this monitoring at the chemical waste landfill is that no concentration limits or trigger levels were exceeded. Next. And continuing along with the monitoring that's required, we do landfill cover inspections to make sure that the cover is performing as it should be. And we do maintenance as needed based on our quarterly inspections. And the results again this year, no major repairs were needed, and we've only needed to conduct routine maintenance at the landfill cover. And we have monitoring equipment that, of course, we maintain. And the annual reporting of all these results are included in our Chem Waste Landfill Annual Monitoring Report. And we completed that and submitted it to NMED in March 2014. That contains the statistical analysis of all the data that we've obtained, and also explains in detail exactly what we did out at that site, the site inspections, any maintenance activities, etc. So these results are not really surprising because just to remind you about the chemical waste landfill, here's a little bit of the background. The landfill was excavated over a period of about 5 years, from 1997 to 2002. And the contents were removed and sorted, and the excavated soil was treated if necessary. And these soils were placed in the Corrective Action Management Unit, that called the KAMU for short. And then this engineered cover was installed over the excavated landfill in September of 2005. This just gives you an idea of the extent of the excavation, and you can see by the heavy equipment down in the hole that it's very, it was a very large excavation. Okay, next. And some of the soils from the Chem Waste landfill were treated using low temperature thermal desorption, and that's the unit there that basically heats the soils, drives off the chemicals, and then those soils were put into the Corrective Action Management Unit. So this is a view of the Corrective Action Management Unit. It is an engineered containment cell, and you can see it's empty right now, and there's like a little path down so trucks can go down the ramp on the right there. And this was constructed specifically for the soils that were excavated from the chemical waste landfill. Next. So one of the activities of long-term stewardship now is to go to this Corrective Action Management Unit, the KAMU, and monitor the collection system. So we pump leachate from the collection system in accordance with the KAMU permit requirements and dispose of that as hazardous waste. And in 2014, we conducted all the monitoring and inspections and maintenance at this CAMU as required by the permit. So the result of that report, or the results are reported in the CAMU report that was handed over to the NMED in 2014, September. So if you have any more questions about this, you can go to these websites if you want further detail. But I think the main takeaway is that the long-term stewardship program conducts extensive monitoring of the environment out here at Sandia to be protective of human health and the environment. So are there any questions? Correct. If you could go back to the, yeah, he's talking about the leachate that comes from the corrective action management unit. You can see the ports, and yeah, it's designed to allow us to pump the leachate out. It's part of the system.
And you were saying that material is contaminated?
It is very, very low level contaminated, but it's treated as hazardous waste. So yeah, and it's only a matter. It's not that many gallons. I don't have the. You know, it's probably tens of gallons, okay, per month.
Where is that coming from?
It comes from the fact that when they constructed the CAMU, they had to compact the soil and they had to add water. So over time, it's going to sink down to the bottom to the collection system, and that's what we pump out. And the amount that has been coming through has been diminishing greatly over time, over the years that we've had this thing in place. Because as you noticed, it was built in 2001. Okay, so again, the points are that the volume is diminishing, and it's very, very lightly contaminated, and it came from the process of putting this unit together. So, right now, the permit for it just has us monitoring indefinitely. There's no end to it, right? So we'll be pumping it. We have decreased the frequency of pumping, okay, because as the volumes went down. So we'll be, every time we renew the permit, we work that out with the New Mexico Environment Department. So just like other sites. Yes, any other questions? Yes?
What are you testing for the vapor wells, those new vapor wells?
The soil vapor wells at the mixed waste landfill? I have to turn it back to the mixed waste landfill personnel. Who wants it? Thank you. Sorry.
Katrina, if you could go back to my presentation. I had some backup slides. Keep going a couple more. Way down. Okay, one more. So that's a little history. One more. So for the long-term maintenance and monitoring plan, this is a portion of what we have to sample for. We have a couple of slides here. So you have.
You mentioned that there's several new beta zones.
Right.
That's what I remember.
And this is part of that. So in the Vado zone, we have VOCs and soil vapor semi-annually, and subsequent year annually what we'll be analyzing for VOCs from each of the soil vapors. These are the methods that they're being collected for. Each of these methods have a list of probably 240 some chemicals that they're looking for. It's a very lengthy, detailed list. But I'm just trying to get you an idea of the extent of what it is in each of those. And that's vadosome monitoring. We have moisture as well as VOCs. We have surface soil for tritium, air for radon. I think we can go to the next one. We have groundwater monitoring, biota, surface sampling, biota cover.
When you say air for radon, is that sampling those new Vados wells?
No, those are from radon monitors that are in the periphery, above ground, correct.
So are you sampling for tritium, radon, and the other radioactive isotopes that, are known and some speculated? You said earlier you weren't very detailed in your current knowledge of the what's in there, what's in the gun. In response to Eric, you said that.
I personally am not.
Yes, correct.
People that work on it are.
And so I'm personally interested
Right.
in what kind of radioactive testing you're doing on those
Right, and that's what I'm trying to share with you, Jim. Those methods give you the list of VOCs. We also have tritium, and there's a, Mike, if you want to add, certainly chime in.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, to directly answer your question, we analyze only VOCs from those soil vapor wells. And it's the same list that we use for the chem waste. It's 50 common volatile organic compounds that are part of the TO15 list defined in the LTMMP. There are no radioactive constituents analyzed in vapor form from those wells.
And I'll just make a comment, and given that's the most serious concern, let's say, and San Diego's own records say they destroyed their list of inventory sometime. There's other people in this room that know exactly in the late 70s. In the late 70s or early 80s. So given the uncertainty of what's in there, and from what I know from other people who have worked very hard on this for a long time, at the mixed waste landfill, it's the radioactive isotopes that are by far the greatest concern. And personally, it's not comforting to know that you're just testing for VOCs out of those wells.
Well, tritium is one of the most, is a constituent that could have the ability to migrate the most out of a series of radionuclides because it forms a radioactive form of water, and it can migrate with the water. And we do monitor for tritium in the soils, but you don't have the ability to monitor tritium in vapor. It's monitored in water, not as a gas. So that's why it's part of
You just said it was monitored in soils, but you don't really have any soils.
soil moisture. Soil moisture. Well, like I said, we've had one set of data collected. Any,
Eric, we've been seeing decreasing tritium. We've been monitoring tritium in surface soil at the corners of the landfill since 1985, and that's been part of the terrestrial sampling program. It's now formalized under the LTMMP. So we are continuing that, and we've seen a decreasing flux of tritium from the landfill over time. There's a very large monitoring program that's part of the requirements in the LTMMP, and I really encourage you all to come to the public meeting on November 18th. We're going to have a whole poster display and people to talk about all the different things we're monitoring, because the point of the long-term monitoring and maintenance plan is to make sure we monitor for the constituents that are mobile, based on the fate and transport modeling that was done after the final order, to address uncertainty and to make sure that the site remains protective of human health and the environment. That data is generated every year, it's reported every year, and as David said, since the LTMMP was approved on January 8th, 2014, every 5 years from that date, we have to submit a 5-year reevaluation report, which not only analyzes the data and the effectiveness of the cover, but also looks at the questions you were bringing up earlier, analyzes, reevaluates excavation of the landfill and other remedial alternatives that the final order did not dictate.
Since the 5-year period was promised starting 2005 when the rod went in, basically?
no, the 5-year period started with the state's approval of the long-term maintenance and monitoring plan. Once the state agreed, here's the system that we want to have in place to monitor for long-term, the state said, this is when the clock starts, go from there, because they wanted to have the system in place to collect the appropriate set of data to then in a 5-year time frame have that data to make a knowledgeable decision on what that data is saying. Before that time, there wasn't enough data to really make any decisions.
So at what time will calendar time will the 5-year review occur?
The report, the first 5-year report, as dictated by NMED, they made the determination that it started, that the 5-year clock started with approval of the LTMMP, and they did that when they approved the corrective measures implementation report and clarified that in the letter. Sandia did not make that determination. The state did. And so January 8th, 2019, the first 5-year reevaluation report will be submitted.
You might mention that Citizen Action is currently suing the Environment Department, and Sandia is an intervener on that lawsuit about the 5-year review period. And the final order said very clearly that Sandia was supposed to perform that every 5 years. You didn't perform it. I don't think there's any reason to believe that when the next report is due that Sandia will not try and find a way to weasel out of it. With respect to the hazardous materials that you've placed in that dump, are you going to inform the public at the November 18th meeting of the materials that were submitted, that were placed in holes in the trenches that were from your experiments of fuel meltdown in the 1970s and 1980s? Are you going to reveal all that information about just how much high-level waste or spent nuclear or special nuclear material or transuranic waste or whatever you want to call it came out of those experiments and was put into the dump?
Turn it on.
Public meeting. The purpose of the public meeting is to share information of everything that was done since the record of decision to install the cover. So we're going from the point forward from when the Environment Secretary made the decision that was challenged in court and supported to put the cover on. It will include information about the installation of the cover, the installation of the long-term maintenance monitoring plan, and the plan to monitor the landfill over the long term. But it won't go back in time to reevaluate everything that had already been discussed in the through the hearing for the mixed waste landfill. It's from that decision point forward.
And unfortunately, we are out of time. The Air Force is ready to take the stage. They're waiting impatiently, I can tell. So thank you very much.